chicken coop. We have an established chicken coop. It's 50 yards from the wall of the neighbor's property. Okay, that chicken coop has 20 chickens in it. And the guy decides he wants a chicken coop with 100 chickens in it. Is he going to be allowed to?
Yeah, we don't go look at the numbers. It's not. It's a chicken coop keep birds, any sort of a birdhouse. It's not that good chickens,
Well,
whatever.
chickens make noise.
Yeah, no, but it's not the noise. Cool. Well, the reason we said they have to stay away is that they shouldn't.
Chickens make more noise.
It's not just the noise. We said that they should stay away from them because they eat up the seeds, etc. So it's not just the noise that's being made.
If I have pigeons, I have 10 pigeons today and 100 pigeons tomorrow. Yeah. They fly everywhere and they poop everywhere.
Right.
Okay, can I keep them from having more pigeons?
You can't. The number you can't keep it. It's the distance. So we said they only eat within 50 yams, no matter how many they are. They only go. Talking about ones. First of all, we're talking about ones that hop, and number two, we're talking about the Mishnah is talking about ones that hop. But in general, the idea is that you can't. That they're only going to eat within 50 yams. That's what the Gemara said yesterday. They might fly further, but they're only going to eat within 50 yams. All right. So today's daf is Boker Tov. Today's daf is Daf Chaf Dalet in Bava Basra, as we learn Parachenu Kol Beis Yisrael and Simba Sav Shiur. We're up to the 10th line on the page. Amar Rava. Shema Min Rav Chia. Rav Chia had this halacha about dam that's found in the cervical canal, and he said you're chayav a beis mikdash because it's vadi tamei. Why? Because it came from the makor, from the uterus, as opposed to a closer chamber in the woman's body. So you see over here that you go by what's the majority, not by the what's near, what's close, what's in closer proximity to the item that you found. So Rava says you see from Rav Chia's halacha 3 things plus. Shema mina rov kar v'hochach harov. You see that again, like Rav Chanina said, that when majority tells you one thing and the closest, the proximity tells you something else, you go according to the majority. Shema mina ruba daraisa. Okay, that we saw from Achrei Rab Mahatos. We saw that many times, but he's just confirming that the ruba is minat Torah, because here, how do you see it as minat Torah? Because he said you would even bring a carbon based on that. It's not a question of Fulum Bazara, and you'd burn truma based on that. In other words, it's vade tomei, and it's minat Torah. If it would only be tomei d'Rabbanan, you wouldn't bring a carbon. That could be Fulum Bazara, and you wouldn't burn truma. Truma became tomei via that. If it was only tomei d'Rabbanan, you wouldn't burn the truma. You would leave it. If it was a suffix, you would just suspend it. You wouldn't burn it. You wouldn't eat it. You see, he's Rav Zera. He tells Rav Zera, Dom Rav Zera, Afisha Dlosos Medina Neulos. Even though the gates of the city are closed. What do we mean by that? Famous case was we had Mesachim and other places. You have 10 stores in town, 10 butchers. 9 are selling kosher meat, and 1 is kosher non-kosher meat. If you go into a store and you buy it, we have halacha that's learned out from the Kamalav Aravalov, that called the Kabur Kamechsa Mechsadam. You went into a store and you're not sure which store you bought it from. 50-50 chance. You got to be machmer. Could be that it was a goyish store that you went into, trade food. That's if you bought it in the store. If you found it in the street, in the butcher area, you go basaro. 9 stores are kosher, 1's not kosher. Of course, today you would throw it out or not be machmer, but technically not Torah, you could eat it because you go basaro. Okay, that's because most of the butchers, 9 out of 10 are kosher. What about looking at it this way? What about outside of the city, where most of the butchers are also kosher? So you have a double majority. You have the majority of the butcher area here in the city, and you have the majority that most of the butchers in the whole general vicinity outside of the city are also kosher. You got a double majority. You don't need a double majority, even though the gates of the city are locked. So what's going on outside the city cannot affect us. You only have 1 majority. That's good enough. That's what he means over here. You see over here, the holds of Rav Zera, even though the doors, the gates of the city, the walls are all closed, still you say is Rav Da'ish also the Chidasus Medina knows. In other words, where's the tumah coming from? It's not coming from anybody outside of her body. It's simply only in this body. And in her body, we have Rov telling you that it's Tameh, that it came from the uterus where most of the blood comes from, and Karov, the closeness, the nearness, telling you that it's a tahor, but we still go basaro. So you see that, so Rava says himself here that you see from Rav Chia, number one, Rav Karv Rov like Rav Chanina. Number two, that Rav is the Raisa, because you'd even bring a carbon based on that, and you would burn Truma based on that. And number three, that he holds a Rav Zeir, that even though that when we say that you go bust a robe in the case of Tesha Chanus, even if you cannot consider the fact that most of the butchers in the country are also kosher butchers, you don't look at that. You only look what's in the city, because it's like a woman is also like the gates of the city are closed. You can't count what's outside. You only have one robe, not two robes. Says the Gemara, I says the Gemara, what do you mean? Rava says over here that you see Rav Karval Chan Rav, but Rav would come Rav Matzui. We said at the top of the page, you can't bring we wanted to bring a raya from Dam Shins of the Prostor. That's that's a proof to Rav Chanina. Rav is set up above on the 6th, 7th line. No, that's different because that's a majority and it's more frequent. There's a double position there. That it's not only the majority going against the proximity, it's the majority and the frequency. Most of the time, the blood that's in that area is from the uterus. So you have a Rov and Matzi, and therefore it's not a proof of Rov Karvach and Rov, because here it's not a simple Rov, it's Rov and Matzi. He says, like, Rav Uda Kamar, Rov and Matzi, Lekron, nobody argues with that. It's not a proof to Rav Chanina, everybody agrees with that. It's hard to be Rav Meir. Rava retracted from that opinion. He says frequency is not an issue. It's either majority, or we saw from Krova that proximity or the nearness, the closeness also is a factor. But which carries greater weight? So Chanina's point is that majority has a better weight, has a stronger weight, greater weight than proximity. That's Rav Chanina's Chiddush. Not necessarily everybody agrees with it. We brought riots from our mission from other places, apparently, that the proximity is more important. Like Mar says, no, that's speaking about where there was no majority. Itmar.
Why does Rav reject it?
Reject what?
Reject Matsui?
He himself had said Matsui, and then he just says it's not much of a factor. In other words, the frequency is not the issue. Doesn't say why. It just says it. It's a svara, like you said yesterday. It's a svara. Rav Matsui, he says, well, Ruba, like, maybe no pasuk for it. Maybe that's the reason, because you have a pasuk for Korov, we have a pasuk for Rov, no pasuk for that, so that even though it's a svara, he rejected that. Itmar, let's say you find a barrel of wine that's floating in the river. Okay, so is it kosher wine or not? Amrav Nimsus, can I get Yeshua Israel? If it's found close to a city that's a Jewish city, you could drink it, drink the wine. Can I get Yeshua as Nachar? If it's opposite a city that's mostly Goyim, Asur, you assume it's Yain Nesach, Goyish wine. Ushmuel Amar Shmuel disagrees. Rav famous Rav and Shmuel always disagree. Rav Shmuel Amar Afil Nimsus, can I get Yeshua Israel? Asur. Even if it's found near a city that's mostly Jews, it's Asur. Now, so what do you see? Why does he say that's Asur? Right? I'm sorry, did I skip something? Yeah, don't say Rabbi Yisrael. Can I get Shmuel? Shmuel Amar Afil Nimsus, can I get Yeshua Israel? Asira. Why? Yeah. Amer, my high dikra asay. That's the name of a city. It's a Goyish city. He says, so what if you found it near a city that's Jewish? It's on a river. You found it floating in the river. Could have flown down from upstream where there's a Goyish city. The high dikra is the Goyish city upstream. So we have machlokas here. Now, what is Rav saying? Rav says what? You look at it's right next to the city. Look at the proximity. It's right next to the Jewish city. Whereas, what is Shmuel saying? Apparently, you go bust to the majority. Most of the world are Goyim. Probably came from there, even though it's close to a Jewish city. Could have come from somewhere else. Maybe that's machlokas here. The Mar is Rav Chanina. Shmuel holds a Rav Chanina. So what if it's Karov? It's close to a Jewish city. But look at the road. Most of the Goyim, most of the people in the world are Goyim, and it probably came from there. Could have flown down the river. Umar less said Rav Chanina. Rav doesn't hold Rav Chanina. Rav says, look at the Karov. The majority says it's Goyish wine. The proximity says it's Jewish wine. You look at it, you say it's Jewish. Apparently, Rav does not hold the Rav Chanina. This is more low. You can't prove it. The Kuliyam is Rav Chanina. It could be even Rav holds Rav Chanina, the Rov of Karv Halchanach Rov. Here's what the machlok is. It's the Marsav. If Rav will say, listen, in Isa the Mahai Dikra, I'll say if it came from this Goyish city upstream, it wouldn't have made it here. It would have never made it. Why? A Kulip Shuri Amitamba, it would have been sunk by the obstacles and the melting snow in the river. In other words, he says, look, you found this barrel next to a river, right? Opposite, it's in the river next to a Jewish city. He says, yeah, normally Rov Akar V'Achan Rov, I would go bus to the majority, even though it's near a Jewish city, probably came from the Goyim upstream. But this barrel wouldn't have made it here, looking at the situation of the river. Look at the Mississippi, right? If it would have come down the river, in the river, the obstacles would have hit it. Rashi says even not only obstacles like fallen trees and rocks. Rashi says even there could have been a whirlpool because of the protruding rocks. Aruchim Kochanar, Mayim Machasar covers it up, and even the boats, even the boats, the ships in there fall into a whirlpool that's created by the various obstacles in the river, and they would have sunk. Or pshuri, or the snow that's melting, it's all over the place. It would have stopped it from coming. In other words, it wouldn't have come down all the way here to the river. So you can't look at the majority here because it probably wouldn't have come. That's Rav's opinion. And Shmuel says, Umar Saba, no. The force of the stream would have come. It would have come down, in the middle of the river. It wouldn't have been on the sides where it got stuck or whatever. The force of the river would have brought it here. Everybody holds Rov Akar V'Achan Rov. Normally, you would say you look at it's closer to a Jewish city, but the majority of the places, the majority of the barrels of wine are goyim. So it would have been not kosher. But over here, it's the reason it's considered kosher because it couldn't have come from upstream.
Each basis
By itself, correct. That's right. That's right.
Could be a very shallow.
That's right. It depends on the situation. Exactly. If it would be a big ocean, big ocean, not a river, you would assume it came from the goyim. Correct. There was a barrel of wine that was found in a Jewish orchard, but it was Arla. It was the first 3 years. You weren't allowed to eat it. Shiur Ravina says that it's mutter. You're allowed to. Why? It was a kosher area. It was a kosher, a kosher orchard, and Jews were around there, and he allowed it. This wasn't a question of Rav Meir. He says, "Lame mishum desavar maybe it's because he holds like a kanina. You don't look at what's far away. You look at what's close by, and therefore, if it was found, he says, in other words, lame mishum desavar like Avkanina rather that not like Rav Kanina holds, because if the barrel of wine would have come from this orchard of Arla, it would be usher. It was Jewish owned, but it was Arla. So it would be, if you assume it came from this orchard, it would be forbidden to drink this wine. But Ravina said that it's okay. So it must be that he held that it came from somewhere else, right? Must be that he holds Rov Akarov, like Rav Chanina says it came from the majority, not from this close by orchard. Morris says, there's no proof that he holds Rav Chanina, shining Osam. The Migna Mina, has somebody stolen this wine, in other words, made this barrel of wine from this orchard, they wouldn't have hid it in the orchard, right? Because they would figure people would have come across it. So if you're stealing grapes and you make wine from this orchard, you're not going to hide it in this place. So therefore, you're not going to. Therefore, it probably came from somewhere else. Not because that it came from somewhere else, because it didn't come from this close by part. It's simply because he says you're allowed to. Somebody had left it here. If they wouldn't have left it, if they took it from this orchard, they wouldn't have hidden it here. They wouldn't have hidden it over here in the very orchard that they stole the grapes from. That's only wine, because wine is under but grapes. If they stole grapes can be hidden because they're less identifiable. The barrel of wine can be identified more because of the nature of the barrel, etc. And people would recognize it. But in the case of grapes all look alike. So it could be that if he found grapes in the orchard, then Einachanami, maybe they wouldn't have been maybe in that case, they would have been considered to have come from the orchard and would have been considered Arla grapes, and you couldn't eat them. But where the barrel of wine, even though it was found in an orchard of Arla, you don't assume that it was Arla grapes, Arla wine, because it probably came from somewhere else. So it's not really a question of Chanina. It's not a question of Rov Bakar Rov. You're looking at the situation again. Each case has to be judged on its own. Similarly, Hani Zika de Chamra, there were some jugs of wine, small jugs, that were found in a Jewish-owned vineyard. Now the question was, did they come from here? Again, are they Jewish? are they, from Jewish owners and their wine is kosher wine, or is it non-kosher wine? Rava allowed it. He says it's mutter. He doesn't like your penina. Because again, Karov tells you that it's kosher. Rove tells you that it's not kosher, right? And that probably came from Goyim elsewhere. You just found, maybe they just dropped them here. Whereas no, you can't prove that. So all these cases where we prove it like Rav Chanina and not like Rav Chanina, we really can't prove it, right? He says, you can't prove it. Why? Shani Hossam, the Ruba de Shevchoi, Yisrael Ninu. Most of the wine sellers who pour wine into jugs, people, take home, whatever, they are Jews. In other words, even though you want to say that what? You says he doesn't hold up Rav Chanina. Why? Because he said, you find these jugs of wine in a Jewish vineyard, you can assume it came from here. And it's kosher, as opposed to saying it came from the rest of the world, which is not kosher. Most of the world is not kosher. No. Over here, it's different because most of the people who pour wine into jugs are Jewish sellers, and therefore it's kosher wine. Animal Rabbi, if it's large jugs, because they use them for, taking home, making kiddush, etc., drinking. Abel Zutri, if they're very small jugs, those could have been passers-by. Small jugs are but people use like for canteens that they travel with. That could have been from Goyim. If there were small ones and big ones together, they were put together with the big ones. Meaning, people take big ones for taking home, not for long traveling. So most of the people who pour wine, who sell wine into big jugs, they're Jewish. So if you find big jugs of wine, you could assume that it was Jewish owned. Small jugs, not so. If you find small ones and big ones, even though they're small ones, which could indicate Goyish passers-by, you assume that the small ones were just made to balance out. Let's say you had two big jugs. One was a gallon, one was a gallon and a half on two sides of the donkey or whatever you were carrying it on. You wanted to balance out the load, so you took a few small ones also to balance it out. So if you found small ones with big ones, as long as you found big ones, you could assume they came from Jewish sellers. And now we come to an Indian of not so much damage, but you have to, if you plant a tree, yes, we'll see if you have a tree, even if you didn't plant it now, but you have a tree within 25 meter amos of the city, you have to move them away. So you cut it down. Why? This is because of the beauty of the city. You want the city to be nice and open, nice, a welcoming area. You got a welcome to this city, right? You don't want it blocked by any trees. If you have a carob or a sycamore tree, which have large branches, we'll see they have large roots, also large spreading roots, but they have also large branches. Chamishimam, you got to leave 50 amos away again because they have large branches, and this is for the beauty of the city. Abasholomer, Kalilan Srak Chamishimama. Any non-fruit bearing tree also you should keep away 50 amos away because they're not pretty. They're not pretty. You want fruit, any non-fruit bearing tree is even more, less beautiful, let's say, than regular trees. So a regular tree, 25 amos. Large trees or non-fruit bearing trees, 50 amos. Now, Ima Ir Kadma. If the city was there before the tree, just cut down the tree. You had no business planting that tree so close to the city. Im Elon Kodam, if the tree was there first, you can cut it down, Venos and Damim, and you pay for it. If the tree was there first, you pay for it, you cut it down, and you pay for it. Okay? But again, if the city was there first, the tree had no business being there, and you cut it down without paying for it. Suffix you're not sure which one was there first, the city or the tree. Code says Venos and Damim. You cut it down and you don't pay for it. Now, again, what we're going to see in the Gemara, why don't you pay for it? Because the city could say, listen, go prove that your tree was there first, right? But why do you cut it down? You cut it down and you don't pay for it because either way, you're going to cut it down. The tree has no business being there. If the tree was there first, for sure, so then they cut it down and they pay for it. If the city was there first, you cut it down without paying for it. Either way, it's going to be cut down. If you're not sure who was there first, the tree or the city, you cut it down, and the guy wants to prove to get paid. He's got to prove that he was there first. My timer. What's the reason, again, why you must keep trees away from the city 25 amos? We're not talking about doing damage with roots, like when it's next to a bore that we've mentioned we're going to have tomorrow also. My timer, because of the beauty of the city. Typically, why don't you say this reason? They know some sort of bigger soda. Pasuk talks about the Or Levim. It says you have to have an area around the city, a migrash, an open area, 1,000 amos in all directions. So why don't you say simply because you cannot make a field, like a cultivated field where you plant produce, you're not allowed to turn the soda into a migrash because you have to. The soda has to be a soda, migrash, and you can't turn a migrash, an open air, into a soda. I'll tell you why. You say it's because of the beauty of the city, not because of these reasons of turning an open area into a field. Rav Lazar, because according to Rav Lazar, Osin Soda Migrash. Rav says you're allowed to. You're not allowed to in an Ore Levium, where the pasuk was talking about in the Levium cities, the Levite cities, but other cities you're allowed to. So here it's Levium. Even though, because Rav Lazar says that the prohibition of turning a field into an open area or an open area into a field is only by the Levite cities. But by the non-Levite cities, you're allowed to. But over here, you're not allowed to put trees because of the beauty of the city. Now, obviously, some areas you may claim that nice palm trees may beautify the perimeter of the city. That's if it's the right kind of tree. But normally, you don't plant trees outside the city. Rabbananami, even according to Rabbananami, Enos and Sada Migrash Sada, you're not allowed to turn a field, a cultivated field, into an open area, and vice versa. Hanimile Zram. That's if you're planting seeds. In other words, you're planting vegetables and vegetables, things of that sort. Those kind of things you can't avali lanos, but trees you're allowed to. You're allowed to plant trees, even if you hold that you can't turn a soda to migrash or migrash into a soda. In this case, you can't turn an open area into a field. That's if you're talking about a field cultivated for produce, for vegetables, aval ilar or legumes, whatever. Aval ilanos, but trees up in you're allowed to. Trees are not the same as Rob. Here because the beauty city not allowed to. Menat taimra, the shiny bangs wrong. Where do you get this idea? There's a difference if you're going to plant seeds or plant trees. The Tanya on Shabbos, let's say you have karfet, a closed area, closed structure, an enclosure. Yosem sign more than 5,000 square amas. Base sign is 5,000 square amas, very big area. Right? Shehukah fladira, it was made for residential purposes. It was enclosed for residential purpose. You're allowed to walk. You're allowed to carry there on Shabbos because it's like a private area. Nizrarupa, if most of it though was planted, you planted there. Then Hareu Kigin, it's like a garden, and Bosser, it's like a garden. You're allowed to carry in there. It's like a field. Nitaruba, but if it was mostly planted with trees, with saplings, Hareu Kachatzer, like a chutzner, which is a semi-private area, and Mutter, you're allowed to carry there on Shabbos. Of course, with Rabbanan, you have to have an Erev, but it's like a chutzner, and you can carry in there. So you see the difference between trees and seeds. The im ha'ir kodma kotis meinos and dam. So we said if the city was there first, you cut it down, you cut down the tree, and you don't pay money. Okay. If the tree was there first, you cut it down and pay money. So it works like this. If you turn the page to Chaf Hamid Beis, tomorrow's daf, you'll see. Look at the Mishnah on Hamid Beis. It says I must move my tree even in my property. You have a bore in your property, I must move my tree away 25 amas. This is the source. This is that main Mishnah we've discussed already many times. Rav Yossi disagrees. The end of the Mishnah it says a carob or sycamore tree, which we saw in our Mishnah on Chavdalit on the base, has large branches. It also has large roots, far extending roots. You got to move 5 amas. However it is, wherever it's going to hit the bore. Now, Imok bor covenant says if the bore was there first, code sakes minos and damim. Right, you can cut down the tree. If the tree was there before, my tree was in my property, and now you want to build a bore in your property, and you're going to claim that my roots are hurting your bore, so I don't have to cut it down. My tree was there first. So now back in our Gemara, my shigabi bor diktani code sakes minos and damim. My shahach diktani code sakes minos and damim. So why by bore it says cut it down and you pay. And here you say, if the bore, by bore we say if the bore was there first, you cut down the tree. If the tree was there first, you don't even have to cut it down. If the bore was there first, you cut down your tree, which is in my property, and you must pay for it, even though the bore was there first. So my shigabi bore diktani kotes minos and damim, or my shnachal diktani kotes minos and damim. Over here, you say if the city was there before the tree, you don't have to pay at all. Rav Kana. So Rav Kana's first answer is that Kirjut debate should be Lachamim, like a famous line that if you have a stew pot, a pot of food that two people are mixing, too many cooks. What's the saying in English? Too many cooks spoil the food. Yeah,
Spoil the broth.
Spoil the froth. Yeah, so the broth. Okay, yeah, the broth, right? The soup. So kidra the beishit v'lochamim lokid. In other words, it's not hot, not cold, meaning you're not going to get anything out of it. You have two people mixing. So here we're talking about a city. Who's going to pay the guy? Here we say you cut it down, right? Here we say you cut it down and you don't pay for it. If the city was there first, you cut down, you don't pay for it. Why do you say that? Because if you'd have to pay for it, nobody would pay for it. Everybody's going to say, okay, listen, you pay. So it's a lot of people there. This is also, a city belongs to many people. So who's going to pay for it? Nobody will cut it down because nobody's going to pay for it. And then the city will be ugly. Therefore, we say, if the city was there first, just cut it down and don't pay. So my question, why is it, how are you comparing the next Mishnah, which talks about your bore and your property versus my tree? This is a city we're talking about. My question, if you're concerned that my bore is going to be destroyed by your tree, so I can tell you to cut down the tree and I have to pay for your tree. But here we're talking about the city. City has more power, right? You're damaging the city. We don't have to pay for your little tree. The damaging the tzibur is worse than damaging the yochid. So by yochid, you have to pay for it. By tzibur, Eliyat Mar, Rav Kana. If you want to say that Eliyat Mar, Rav Kana, Asefit Mar. If Rav Kana's rule about that the stew pot of partners is not cold, it's not hot, it's not cold because they can't get together. It's like other shutfin, right? Doesn't work. Rav Kana Asefit, it's going on the Sefit. Says what? If the tree is there first, you cut it down and you pay for it. Right? You cut it down, we say you pay for it. We said if the city is there first, you cut it down, don't pay for it. If the tree was there first, you cut it down, you pay for it. But why can't he say Havali Beresha Dami Barek? It's wait. You want me to cut it down, then you're going to pay for it? You know, it's like suing the city for payment. Try to get your money back from the city. You know, I'll tell you what, pay me for the tree and then I'll cut it down. Why can't he say that? Because if we tell you that if you say first get money, first get paid, and then I'll cut down the tree, you'll never cut down the tree because till you get the people in the city to pay for it, everybody will say you pay, no, you pay, try to collect it. It's like trying to collect. You ever been in a house that has many apartments and the bias tries to collect the money from everybody? There's always people who are in arrears in those situations. It's hard to collect from everybody. So kind of says that's why we say that you cut down the tree and then get paid. Because if you say I'm going to get paid first, nobody will ever pay him, and therefore the tree won't get cut down. So if Khan is explaining simply the safe, it's not explaining between our mission and the mission on Chafayim and Beis. Mission of Beis is talking about two individuals. Here we're talking about a city versus an individual. Suffix zek kadam is the suffix zek kadam. What's the rule? There's a rule, by the way, when you damage that the city does to you, you got injured by the city. There's some rule about the king's property that you can't sue the city for anything. It's only if they allow you to sue them. See, if you damaged me, I could just sue you in court. But a city, the government, you can't sue the government unless they make specific allowances that you're allowed to sue them in this particular case. Otherwise, they stand on the king's property yard. So let's say the Mishnah said, you're not sure who was there first. Was a city there first or my tree was there first? Then you cut it down and you don't pay. Maisha by bore. So again, he says by bore, the amrit lo yikos. In the case of the bore, you say what? If you're not sure who was there first, my bore or your tree, my bore or your tree, you're not sure, don't cut it down. Right? Suffix zek kodam zek mission on the bay on Chafayim that says so. Don't cut it down. Don't cut it down. Maybe I was there first. We don't know. And here you say, Maisha gabi bore the amrit lo yikos. If you're not sure, Hasa, right? And here you say that you cut it down and don't pay. Right? Let him prove that the tree was there first. Hasam divided lava make its going. Therefore, over there, by the answers on Chafayim Beis, where you're not for sure going to cut it down, because if I can prove that my tree was there before your bore, you can't force me to cut down my tree, right? So you're not for sure going to cut it down. So Suffolk also, you say don't cut it down, don't cut it down. Maybe I was there first. Over here, so Sveikunami Law Mina Lakers, we don't cut it down. But in the case of the city with the tree, either way, it's going to get down. If the city was there first, you don't even have to pay for it. If the tree was there first, the city will cut it down and pay for it. You're for sure going to cut it down. Either way, I got to cut it down. I'm entitled. The city is entitled to cut down the tree in either case. The question is, you're going to pay or not. If it's for money, I see Rav Shekel, go proof that you were there first to get paid. So when my tree is next to the city, the tree is going to be cut down either way. The question is, am I going to get paid? If I can prove that I was there before the city was built, then they'll pay me for it. If the city was there first, they're not going to pay me for it. If we're not sure, we can't prove it. Either way, the tree is going to come down. I have to now prove that if I want to get money from the city, I got to prove it. But in the case of the bore, if my tree was there before your bore, you can't force me to cut it down at all. So if we're not sure, we're not going to cut down my tree. If you have a fixed, a permanent granary, the problem with the granary we'll see is when they process the grain, they throw it up in the air. It's called winnowing, right? They throw it up in the air. The chaff goes and spreads all over the place. The chaff ruins other people's fields, other people's trees, etc., plantings. So you have to leave, if you have a permanent granary, you have to leave it outside, keep it, you have to station it outside the city 50 amos. You can't do it within 50 amos of the city, because otherwise the chaff will go and ruin other people's plantings and cultivation. Even if you make the permanent granary in your own property, you shouldn't do it. You got to put it within 50 amos from your border, so you shouldn't hurt somebody else's property. And you have to leave it far away from somebody else's saplings, somebody else's trees. From his plowed field, which he plows prior to planting, that it shouldn't do damage. So at the beginning of the mission, it says you got to leave these things 50 amos away from the city, 50 amos away from a neighboring property. And then he says, and you keep it away from somebody else's plantings enough not to do damage. So it sounds like he's talking about two different measurements. First, he says keep a permanent granary away from somebody else's property by at least 50 amos from the city or from your neighbor. And then he says, and you keep it away enough not to do damage. Not mashma, it doesn't have to be 50 amos. So my said, what's the innovation safe? The safe is talking about a non-permanent goer. So you're going to have less produce there. See, when you have a regular permanent granary, you're going to have a lot of produce there. And what? What's the case of you don't need a shovel. You don't need a winnowing shovel. In other words, you have a small amount of grain there. It's just set up. It's just a temporary granary. So you're not going to throw it up in the air. The damage is not going to go as far. It's not going to go away. It's not going to go 50 amos. The wind will just push it a little bit away. So therefore, you just have to keep it away from somebody else's property enough not to do damage. It could be 20 amos, 30 amos, whatever it is. Rav says, no, both the posts of the Mishnah go together. What's the reason why you have to keep it away 50 amos? So that it shouldn't do damage. But there's no difference in the ratio and the safer. They both mean 50 amos. Okay, but Rav Abai didn't want to give that answer because why did he say Kadesh Yazik? It's obvious you keep it away 50 amos Yazik. It's mashma two different shiurim according to Abai. Meisvei. The price says Machik and going Kabo Menir Chamisham, you keep it away 50 amos. Ukshem Machik Menir, just like you keep it away from the city 50 amos. You also keep it away Machik and Midalua, you keep it away from your neighbor's gourds, and from his cucumbers, from saplings, and from his plowed field. So the price says very clearly the 50 amos is so that it shouldn't do damage. It's like one reason. It's not two separate things. It's not chamisham amos is one measure for permanent granaries, and for a non-permanent granary where it doesn't go as far because you don't winnow it up in the air with a shovel, so it doesn't go as far. That's only kadesh yazik. Well, the Bryce is mashma, it's all one thing, like Abai. Like Ravashi. Ravashi says that's exactly Pshat in our Mishnah. Why 50 amos? That it shouldn't do damage. Elabai kasha. But according to Abai, he says no. 50 amos is for a permanent granary. For non-permanent granary, it's just enough. Whatever it should do damage. And Achami, it's a kasha. Tosu says that what's the kasha? The Bryce is speaking. Why didn't just say that the Bryce is speaking about a go run? Kavu in the Mishnah speaking about that it's going not kavu. So he gives an answer. But he says, why did he have to say Kadesh Yazik was the exercise? So from Abay's mashma from the Mishnah that we're talking about two different cases. So I can understand why you have to keep your grains away from cucumbers and gourds, because the avak, the dust, the chaff that blows off the grain will go into the heart of these vegetables and dry it up. Why do you have to keep away from somebody's plowed field? What is the chaff going to do to a plowed field? If it's a plowed field before you planted it, before you seeded it, what's the problem? Rabbi Barzaf became Rabbi Barzutri Mipnei Sha'asa also Galal. It makes it more dung, meaning makes more fertilizer. Too much fertilizer. If you fertilize it too much, it's going to ruin the plants. So when you plow the field, you plow it and you put fertilizer there. Now, if somebody's too much chaff goes into that fertilized field that's plowed up, there's too much fertilizer there, and that's going to ruin the plants. Says the Mishnah, you keep these things away from the city also. What are they? Carcasses of animals, right? You have a non-kosher shlachtos or whatever, and you have carcasses there. Don't do the stink. The stench is bad for the city. The forest also, dead bodies sometimes can stink. That's a Burski, a tannery, Menir Chamishimama. Einos and Burski, Elabisr. Says the Tanakama, you only make a tannery on the east side of the city, the east of the city. Why? Because the wind from the easterly wind that comes from the east is very soft. Doesn't do a lot of damage, very calm. So it's not going to smell, it's not going to blow in. But if you make it in any other direction, the smell of the tannery will come into the city. So again, we're concerned about environment. The EPA, the Environmental Protection, whatever it's called, agency, will come in and say, you can't do these things. You can't put a tannery in any other direction, only on the east side of a city. Rabbi Kiva Omer. Now, Rabbi Kiva is a little bit of a controversial thing. We go like the Tanakh. Rabbi Kiva says the Chol Ruachos, you can make it in any direction, except on the west side. Except on the west side. Why on the west side? Maybe because of the wind or for some other reason. The Gemara will talk about that. You got to keep 50 amos away. So it's not clear what Rabbi Kiva means. Does he mean that you could do it on any side except for the west side, and on the west side you do 50 amos, or any other side you do 50 amos where you're allowed to, and on the west side you can't do it at all? That's what Gemara is going to deal with that. As a Mishra is where they soak flax, like a flax pool. Keep that away from vegetables. That also is bad for the vegetables. That's a creation and the leeks. You keep those away from onions. In other words, many vegetables can grow together. Alternative size, whatever, but alternate size. But certain vegetables ruin others. So leeks are not good for the onions. That's a hard environment. Also keep away mustard from the bees, because that can ruin the bee production. Rabbi Yossi Matzah B'charo, he's Matzah in that case. Tomorrow we'll discuss all this. But the first question is Rabbi Kiva. The Tanakhama says you can make a tannery in any direction from the city except for the east side, except for the east side. And you only make it on the east side, because from the other directions you can't do it because the smell will ruin the city. On the east side, it's okay because the smell will not come into the city. That's what Tanakhama said. Rabbi Kiva said, no, you could make it on any side except for the west side, and keep 50 amos away. So the Gemara's first question: can you do it on any side right next to the city, except on the west side, because you keep that away 50 amos? So you got to keep that at 50 amos. Maybe means you can make it on the north, south, or east as long as it's 50 amos away. Except on the west side, you can't do it on the west side of the city at all. Can't make the tannery side at all. So that's the Gemara's question. Is Tashma. We have a proof from this price. At the time of Rabbi Kiva Omer, again, here he explains it more clearly. He says you can make it, and that's when he says it's going on a place that you could do it on the south, east, or north, and you keep it away 50 amos, the tannery. Except on the west side, the enos kolika, you don't do it all on the west side at all. Because it's always there. Tadir means it's always common there. What's always common there? Is it the wind or is it the Shechina? That Hashem, the Shechina is that we play in that direction. So tomorrow's Gemara is going to discuss it. We'll see that it's because of the Shechina. We don't hold like a Kiva. We hold like Tanakama, that you can make a Borski in any direction. I'm sorry, you cannot make a Borski in any direction. Only a Enos as a Borski, and he says Enos and Borski Misrafir. The Tanakama says you got to keep it away 50 amos, and even when you make it 50 amos away, it's got to be on the east side, because on the east side it won't blow in. But if it's on the other side, it would blow in apparently. Even if it's more than 50 amos, you shouldn't do it there. So tomorrow's Gemara will pick it up from here. Amalei Rabbi of Nachman, Micah there. What do we mean by common? Is it common because of the wind, or common because the Shekhinah is in that direction? We daven there. So that's tomorrow's Gemara will pick it up from here, and that'll take us through through tomorrow's Gemara, and on Sunday, Mitzvah Hashem, we'll pick it up from the top line, the last two words on Chavav Manal, the Bei Bar Mir, we'll pick it up from there on Sunday morning. Shabbat Shalom L'Kulam.
It's a machine everywhere.
Yes.
So what do